Hello, M3. Miss Jess here, reading a few more chapters for you from the book There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. This chapter we are starting with today is Chapter 4. Bradley stood at the front door and hollered, "Mrs. Ebel is a liar. Don't believe anything she says." Bradley's mother got into the car, gritted her teeth, and drove to school. She was just as afraid as Bradley, if not more so, of what Mrs. Ebel would tell her. She wanted to believe Bradley when he told her he was getting all A's or was elected class president. She tried to fool herself that it could be true, even though she knew it couldn't. She knew her son, and she knew Mrs. Ebel wouldn't take the trouble to call her on the phone if everything was really as wonderful as Bradley said it was. Still, she hoped. She opened the door to Bradley's classroom. No one was there. "Hello?" she called out timidly. She looked around. There was a bulletin board covered with A papers. She looked from one paper to another and hoped with all her heart that she'd see one with Bradley's name on it. She didn't. In the back corner of the room, she saw a chart that listed the name of every student in the class. Next to each name was a row of gold stars. Next to Bradley Chalkers, there were no stars. "Mrs. Chalkers?" Startled, she turned around to see Mrs. Ebel. "Oh, you scared me," she said, and then she smiled. Mrs. Ebel didn't smile. Mrs. Chalkers sat at a chair next to the teacher's desk and bravely listened as Mrs. Ebel told her about Bradley. There was nothing Mrs. Ebel said that she didn't already know. Still, it hurt to hear it. "Deep down, he really is a good boy," she tried to tell Bradley's teacher. "I'm sure he has a lot of good qualities," said Mrs. Ebel. "However, I have 28 other children in my class, and I can't spend all of my time trying to help Bradley. He has to decide whether he wants to be a part of the class or not. And if he doesn't want to be a part of this class, then he shouldn't be here. He just makes it that much harder for everyone else." "What can I do?" said Bradley's mother. "The school has just hired a counselor," said Mrs. Ebel. "I would like your permission for Bradley to begin seeing her once a week." "Anything that will help my son," said Mrs. Chalkers. "I don't know if she can help him or not," said Mrs. Ebel. "Bradley has a very serious behavior problem. If he doesn't show improvement soon, more drastic measures will have to be taken." "Deep down, he really is a good boy," said Bradley's mother. "Well, let's go meet the counselor," said Mrs. Ebel. She led Bradley's mother down the halls to the counselor's office. The door was open, but no one was there. Bradley's mother stepped into the room. Boxes were everywhere. Some were turned over, with their contents half spilled onto the floor. A yellow ladder lay on its side. In the center of the room was a round table surrounded by chairs, but the table and chairs were covered with papers and boxes and games and books. There was hardly room for Bradley's mother and teacher to stand. "She's just moving in," Mrs. Ebel explained. "I'm sure she'll have it cleaned up by tomorrow." Mrs. Chalkers shrugged. She picked up a dolphin puppet from an open box on the table and put her hand inside it. Suddenly there was a loud grunt, and a young woman entered the room. She dropped the box she was carrying, and more than 100 crayons spilled out across the floor. "Oh, hello," she said. She was a lot younger than either Mrs. Ebel or Mrs. Chalkers. She wore blue jeans and a red t-shirt with "Rock and Roll" written across it in light blue letters. She had light brown hair, almost blonde, and clear blue eyes. "I'm Carla Davis," she said, and held out her hand. Bradley's mother stared at her a moment, then reached out to shake her hand, but suddenly realized she was still wearing the dolphin puppet. She quickly removed it and put it back in the box on the table. The counselor smiled. "She needs to sign the form so that you can start seeing her son," said Mrs. Ebel. Miss Davis looked hopelessly around her office. "They're around here somewhere," she muttered, and then began tearing into the boxes. "Perhaps I'd better come back," said Bradley's mother. "Found them," said the counselor, holding up the forms. She cleared a space on the round table by pushing away a box and gave Mrs. Chalkers a form to sign. Bradley's mother looked around the messy office and then at the young woman with the rock and roll t-shirt. She shrugged her shoulders and signed her name. Miss Davis took the form from her. Oh, you're Bradley Chalker's mother. Mrs. Chalkers nodded. You would not believe all the horror stories I've heard about Bradley Chalkers, said the new counselor. I've been here less than 3 hours, but it seems like every teacher in the school has dropped by to warn me about him. Deep down, he really is, Bradley's mother started to say. I can't wait to meet him, the counselor interrupted. He sounds charming, just delightful. Chapter 5. At dinner, Bradley's father asked how the meeting with Bradley's teacher went. Bradley looked down at his mashed potatoes. Fine, said his mother. Bradley is doing really very well. Good, glad to hear it, said his father. Bradley was glad to hear it, too. Later that evening, his mother came into his room. I met Miss Davis, the new counselor, she said. You're going to begin seeing her tomorrow. No, said Bradley, I won't go. Please, Bradley, don't be that way. She can help you if you'll let her. I don't need any help. You said I was doing very well. Did you want me to tell your father the truth? Do you want to be sent to a military school? Maybe he's right. I don't know. Maybe that's what you need. You said I was doing very well. I heard you. Please, Bradley, said his mother, give Miss Davis a chance. Please? You should have taken me to the zoo. It was drizzling the next morning as Bradley walked to school. He wore red rubber boots and a yellow raincoat. He stamped in every puddle along the way, making big splashes. He suddenly stopped when he saw Jeff standing next to the school under the overhang. Bradley's right foot remained in the center of a puddle as he stared at his one and only friend. He took a deep breath, then slowly walked toward Jeff. He has to like me, he tried to convince himself. I gave him $1. Hi, Bradley, Jeff greeted him. He didn't answer. If you want, I can help you with your homework sometimes, Jeff offered. I know I'm new here, but I'm pretty smart, and we learned the same stuff at my old school. He shrugged modestly. Bradley looked at Jeff as if he were from outer space. I don't need any help, he said. I'm the smartest kid in the class. Ask anyone. They headed for Mrs. Ebble's room, side by side, but not necessarily together. Chapter 6. Jeff Fishkin was hopelessly lost. He clutched his hall pass as he looked down the long, empty corridor. The school seemed so big to him. He was on his way to see the new counselor. She was supposed to help him adjust to his new environment. Now, he not only didn't know how to get to her office, he had no idea how to get back to Mrs. Ebble's class either. The floor was slippery. It had started raining during recess, and the kids had tracked water and mud inside with them. A teacher carrying a stack of papers stepped out of a door, and Jeff hurried up to her. Can you tell me where the counselor's office is, please? He asked. His voice trembled. The teacher first checked to make sure he had a hall pass, and then she said, The counselor's office, let's see. Go down this hall to the end, turn right, and it's the third door on your left. Thank you very much, said Jeff. He started to go. No, wait, said the teacher. That's not right. She's in the new office and in the other wing. Turn around, go back the way you just came, then turn left at the end of the hall, and it's the second door on your right. Thank you, Jeff said again. He walked to the end of the hall, turned right, counted to the second door on his left, and pushed it open. A girl with red hair and a freckled face was washing her hands at the sink. When she saw Jeff, her mouth dropped open. What are you doing here? She asked. Huh? Jeff uttered. Get out of here, she yelled. This is the girls' bathroom. Jeff froze. He covered his face with his hands, and then he dashed out the door. There's a boy in the girls' bathroom! The girl screamed after him. He raced down the hall. Suddenly, his feet slipped out from under him. He waved his arms wildly as he tried to keep his balance and then flopped down onto the floor. Oh, no, 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 he groaned. What have I done? Why didn't I just read the sign on the door? This is the worst day of my whole life. Suddenly he realized he was no longer holding the hall pass. He stood up and frantically looked around. Don't tell me I dropped it in the girls' bathroom. He heard someone coming and hurried off in the opposite direction. He rounded the corner, then spotted what looked like some kind of storage room. It was cluttered with boxes. He ducked inside and closed the door behind him. Hello, said a voice. He spun around. A woman stepped down off a yellow ladder. You must be Jeff, she said. I'm Carla Davis. She smiled and held out her hand. I am so glad you've come. I was afraid you might get lost. That is the end of that chapter. And we will resume with Chapter 7 at another time. Thanks for listening.